Okay, let's bring in our panel now of Fed experts to break down the Fed's economic projections even further. Joining us now is Dave Berzano, DDJ Capital Management President and Chief Investment Officer, also Michael Cox, former Dallas Fed Chief Economist and Senior Vice President. We're going to start with you, Michael. As a former Fed chief, looking through the statement, listening to these new projections, what immediately stands out to you the most?
More of the same, and I think that's what's called for in this case, because in the economy it's going to be more of the same, probably at least for a year. I think we're in a holding pattern, almost in purgatory for a year until business people can see what's going to happen in Washington. I went to a meeting a couple of weeks ago with 150 CEOs from all over the nation, mid-level CEOs, and almost to a person. They said the same thing. We're in a holding pattern. We're conserving our cash because, number one, we don't know how bad the economy is going to get, and if it does get bad, we want to survive. Number two, we don't know about all these regulations government has imposed on us, how much Obamacare is going to cost. And so they're just in a wait-and-see mode. They're not interested in going to banks to borrow. They're not interested in going to the market. And so it's a mess.
So Dave, taking that into account, businesses not sure what's going on. I've always been under the impression that Ben Bernanke wants to be one of these bold Fed chairmen. He's talked about being a straight shooter. They've downgraded everything about the U.S. economy, and still, to Michael's point, it's more of the same. Do you think the door's open enough and that it could be articulated enough to the economy and to business leaders that the Fed will still do more to sort of boost this economy?
Well, I think they downgraded their projections more in line with ours. But, an interesting thing about this is with these downward revisions, it gives the Fed, I believe, a little bit more cover not to do something for a longer period of time because the economy is performing in line with their lower expectations. So I think it gives them a little bit more flexibility here.
Michael and Dave, stay with us. We're just minutes away from Fed Chairman Ben Bernanke's news conference. What will he say about the economy, Europe, and the possibility for much more stimulus? We're all going to be continuing to dissect it, watching it right here on Fox Business.
Ben Bernanke will begin his news conference in moments. Let's go back now to our all-star panel. Dave Berzano, DDJ Capital Management President and Chief Investment Officer, and Michael Cox, former Dallas Fed Chief Economist and Senior Vice President. Dave, I want to start with you here. You seem to suggest that the Fed has something of a luxury of waiting, but realistically, with the sort of economic pressure that we're facing and the global pressures we're facing, aren't they under some sort of pressure to step up and go beyond this Operation Twist?
Well, they are under a lot of pressure, as is all the central banks. But the challenge they have is they have very few bullets left, so they have to use them judiciously. And I think the signal they've sent is that they expect slower growth, which is what I think the majority of private economists are expecting. And if growth comes closer in line to these new lower projections, people aren't going to be surprised when the Fed doesn't take more significant action. So I think it just gives them a little bit more flexibility, and I think it's the right thing for them to do.
Last time when we had you on, Mike, we played this game. What would you ask Ben Bernanke if you were in the audience? What would you like to ask or maybe hear from him today out of this news conference?
When are you going to work with the other regulatory authorities to make it easier for people to borrow in terms of all the regulatory burden? The true cost of borrowing right now is not the interest rate. That's very low. The real cost of borrowing, the high real cost, comes from the real side. You know, the amount of paperwork and compliance issues you have to go through just in order to make a loan. So, in order to borrow. So, on the one hand, people, businesses don't really want to borrow. But on the other hand, the government is not making it very easy for them. So the economy is not going to get going again until some of these reserves and banks come out.
Fed Chairman Ben Bernanke is about to speak. Let's listen in.